I hope you're okay out there. So a friend of mine asked us to do a Ronnie James Dio one of these. So I kind of had to think about it, and I thought, well, he could do a whole Dio, the band, or he could do a kind of mini one with just his Black Sabbath stuff. So what I decided in the end was to kind of look at his whole career. I'm going to omit the live albums and start with Rainbow. Elf, I've never heard anything. It's just I just haven't got around to checking them out. I've got a big list of bands to check out, and Elf's one of them. But little quick history about Ronnie James Dio. I think what's really interesting is he didn't make the debut, the first Rainbow album, until he was about 32, 33, which is very old in rock terms. You know, typically most artists by the time they're 25 will have made their debut album there, or the thing that's going to be of a reasonably sized impact. So Ronnie Dio is actually around in the back end of the 50s, early 60s, because he's born 1942. So you can actually find stuff of him doing with Ronnie and the Prophets, of him doing the period kind of rock music of the time. So he had an amazing, an interesting career, probably, in all that time before we even knew who he was. So that's kind of strange. I remember, like, he used to read his date of birth and he used to say 1949. So I think for a time they were maybe kind of changing his date of birth to make him seem younger. Because obviously rock music is quite, well, music in general is very ageist. So it's just amazing that dedication that he had. You know, imagine, you know, you're born 1942, by 1972, 1970, you're in your late 20s, you may be making your first album with Alf, you know, your first sort of fledgling stuff, and you're still going to be not making much money or anything. So just totally dedicated to his craft, his passion. Okay, so basically it's in Elf. They support Deep Purple, I think. Richie Blackmore spots him, thinks this guy's a great singer, and what he basically does is makes the first Rainbow album, Richie Blackmore's Rainbow, with Elf as his backing band minus the guitar player. And that's Richie Blackmore's Rainbow. It actually took me a long time to get this album, Man on the Silver Mountain. Obviously I knew that track. Quite an interesting little story. The first holiday I went on abroad with my then girlfriend, his now wife, we went to Greece, and then we sat on a beach and there was a song playing from the restaurant we were near, and it was actually Catch the Rainbow, and I'd never heard it before. We'll come to the other albums. It's just one of those ones I just hadn't got around to getting it. There's that much stuff out there. So I didn't get this album till the early noughties. I think it's a really solid debut. I think there's two things lets it down. I think the production's not great. It's produced by Martin Birch, Richie Blackmore, Ronnie Dio. I don't know, for whatever reason, I haven't quite got the sound down yet. And the Elf band is not the calibre of the backing bands or the musicians that Rainbow would have later on. But the songs are really good. You got Man on the Silver Mountain, which is a classic track. Much slower tempo on this than you hear live. Self Portrait, that's a good track. That's kind of in 3/4 time, isn't it? Waltz time, that's pretty cool. Then you got the cover of Quatermass's Black Sheep of the Family. Quite an interesting track, that. Quatermass were a kind of cult, very late 60s, early 70s British rock band, I think. And I think Mick Underwood of Gillan played for them. And Judas Priest in the early days of Al Atkins used to cover the track Black Sheep of the Family, I think. Then you got Catch the Rainbow, beautiful song, absolute classic. Snake Charmer, good track. And then the other great deep cut on this album, which is my favourite, which is The Temple of the King. A band I featured last time doing this, the second to last time, was the Scorpions, and they do a great version of this on the Ronnie James Dio tribute album. They're one of the few bands that kind of make it their own. It's fantastic. There you go. If you don't like rock and roll, that's canny. 16th Century Green Sleeves, that's really good. And then Still I'm Sad, a great Richie Blackmore instrumental, and something he'll, you know, return to on the Difficult to Cure album, doing a kind of a classically infused instrumental. So it's solid 8 out of 10. You know, it's not a classic album, but it's got some classic tracks, and it's got the lyrical elements that are going to play a big part, not only in the Rainbow sound, in the early Rainbow sound, but also in Ronnie James Dio's lyrical style. That's principally why Blackmore got him. Not just because of his voice, but he had a lyrical style that Blackmore wanted to use. Which, yeah, in tracks like Burn and Stormbringer, you can see that. You can see I covered that on Glenn Hughes, kind of did those kind of lyrics that Blackmore probably liked. Burn but obviously he wanted to go the whole hog with that. So the next album they do is this, Rising. Let's put that cover up close. One of the great album covers of all time, I would say, for me. Only Sad Wings of Destiny betters it. What can I say about this album? If you don't own it, if you've not heard it, well, you need to. It's one of the greatest achievements in hard rock, heavy rock. It's not heavy metal, but it prefaces it. It's kind of got the lyrical content and the style that will go into the genre known as power metal, which is hugely popular in Europe. I mean, you've got loads of power metal bands now. This is where it starts, really. You've got a crack team. He's got rid of the rest of the band. He's kept Dio. He's got Cozy Powell, fantastic on this, one of the all-time great rock drummers. He's got Jimmy Bain, great bass player, someone he'll work with later. Obviously, Ronnie Dio will. And then Tony Carey, the unsung hero of this album. He only did one album with Rainbow, but I think he's infinitely the best Rainbow keyboard player. Obviously, Don Airey, fantastic, but it's different times in Rainbow, and what Don Airey does with Deep Purple's great. I think Tony Carey on this, the opening track, Tarot Woman, opens with his keyboards, and it just sets the scene, and when that riff comes in, it's just fantastic. It's one of the, I still remember when my brother bought this album home, we put it on, you got that keyboard intro comes in, Dio announces himself, it's all about the Tarot Woman at the fair, don't go to the fair. It's daft, but one of the things I really like about Dio's lyrics is he kind of has themes in them that warns people, don't do this. He warns you of danger, of evil, of duplicity, things like that. And Tarot Woman's like that, It's great lyric. It really kind of fills your mind with the images. Then you got Run with the Wolf. That's one of the kind of lesser known tracks of the album, but it's great. I learnt this song for someone recently and I was just like, what a great track. Starstruck is another classic off the album. Then Side 1, there's only 6 tracks on this album, finished with Do You Close Your Eyes, which is a great rocker. It's only 2 minutes 58. It's just such a good track, it's just a good time rock track. Then Side 2 opens with, again, one of the greatest epic in the history of hard rock, heavy rock and metal. Sorry Kashmir, Stargazer. Incredible orchestration, incredible lyrics. The lyrics today, on this day, in this very week, with what's happening in the world, shows the danger of following false prophets into the desert, following them over cliffs. And that's what's happened around the world, in my opinion, people following false prophets. And Dio captures that with a fantasy lyric about the Stargazer, the wizard, leading people into the desert to build the Tower of Stone, but it all ends in tears. Incredible song, one of the great songs of the genre. We're talking about, then it's weird, when I was younger, you used to get the track that finishes the album, The Light and the Black, and that maybe seemed a little bit of a come down after Stargazer, but once you've heard tracks a lot of times, then you start looking at tracks you don't know as well. Light and the Black's a great track, and it shows off the incredible skills of the band. There's great instrumental breaks. Blackmore's phenomenal, Cozy's phenomenal, Tony Carey's phenomenal, Jimmy's phenomenal. Ronnie James Dio, he does an incredible note at the end. He goes, I see the light, I see the light. It's a great melody. Absolute 10 out of 10. Not one wrong track. There's very few albums I love. I love a lot of albums, but there's very few that are 10 out of 10s. There's Rage for Order, Queensryche, Operation Mindcrime. Those two I think are perfect. 1984 and Van Halen 1, they're perfect. Power Age by AC/DC, Rising. There's not many where it's just all killer, no filler. So then have the difficult job of the sophomore album. Well, it's not their sophomore album, Rising is, but the one, after Rising. Again, weird when I didn't get this album till later on. I'd heard Gates of Babylon, I'd heard Long Live Rock and Roll. When we were younger, when I was a kid, my brothers had these albums, but they didn't have Long Live Rock and Roll. So I came to this kind of later. Again, it's not as good as Rising, but it is become sort of a classic, I think. It's a really great record. You've got Long Live Rock and Roll, one of my favourite deep cuts, Lady of the Lake, and LA Connection as well. Really good. And then Gates of Babylon finished side 1. In actual fact, side 1 there, right there, what a great 4 tracks. Productions may be better on this album than Rising. It's got a really good sound. And it's different from Rising. It's still got the fantasy lyrics. It's just kind of a little more Americanized, I think. Side 2 opens with Kill the King, absolutely phenomenal. So when you're listening on CD, your first 5 tracks off the bat are awesome. Then you kind of get your more filler tracks. You've got The Shed, Subtle in Brackets, quite a strange lyric on that. Sensitive to Light, which is a good time rocker, a bit like Do You Close Your Eyes. Then it finishes with a beautiful song that he wrote for his wife, Wendy Dio, his then girlfriend, Ronnie, called Rainbow Eyes. So those tracks are good, you know. It's a solid 8.5 out of 10, really good. So, you know, Dio, once he's teamed up with Richie Blackmore, he hasn't made a bad album. He's established his lyrical style. He's established how mighty his singing is. Basically, I don't know what goes wrong. They do a live album. I'm not sure what goes wrong with him and Blackmore, but I think Blackmore maybe wants to change sound, or Dio just wants to cut loose a bit, cast off shackles, but he finds himself unemployed and looking for a band, and Ozzy Osbourne has just left Black Sabbath. Black Sabbath are looking for a singer, and Tony Iommi and Dio connect, get together, and basically he joins Black Sabbath. I think that they maybe didn't want to call it Black Sabbath, but again, record company politics was of such that they needed to keep the Black Sabbath name. So basically, when I first got into heavy metal, I saw posters of Black Sabbath, but they were with Ozzy. So when I first heard the opening track off this next album, I thought like, I didn't expect the Black Sabbath singer to sound like that. And then when I looked on the back of the album and it had the pencil draw, well, not pencil, or the drawing there, I thought, oh, that's a different singer. Anyway, the first track I heard off this was, of course, the opening track, Neon Nights. So I'm sorry to sound like a stuck record, but yeah, it's one of the greatest songs ever written. I think there was a review in Classic Rock and said, you know, maybe Dio did the best ever vocal on this track. Not only his best ever vocal, maybe the best rock metal vocal ever. He doesn't do any screams, but what he does, he sings in the very top of the tenor register. That's something important to say, is that all the great rock singers that kind of hit the bigger notes that you really like, they're effectively in the same register as your tenor opera singer, and the top notes are C. So Dio, in the middle section of this, goes a tone above that. He actually hits a high D in his, probably in what's his chest range, I'm guessing. And the power and the control of the melody and the vibrato and everything is superb. And the other thing about this song is the melody line. You know, he picks notes that bands or other singers wouldn't typically pick, or I think he's using a mode that you know, American rock in the back end of the 70s, they were starting to get different sounds, get away from the bluesy thing, the kind of blues notes. So this is actually uses something called a mixolydian mode. But anyway, I'm going into music theory twaddle, but basically the sound of the melody is just superb. The way it interacts with Iommi's guitar on this. Geezer Butler, plays up an absolute storm. You know, he kind of adapted his style and he plays absolutely phenomenal in this. And Bill Ward straightened his playing up, lost a bit of his jazz swing, which is fantastic, obviously. But every band member plays out of that absolute skin on this album. Iommi's solos were his best ever. Geezer's right up there with the greatest thing he ever did. Bill Ward, hard hitting. Unfortunately, Bill Ward would leave during the tour and Vinny Appice would come in. Anyway, you've got Children of the Sea. Again, the first 2 tracks, again, they're showing Dio's lyrical style, the fantasy, but the kind of bit of science fiction. And I think that's quite interesting because obviously Geezer Butler wrote sci-fi lyrics. So Dio coming in, it wasn't a big jump with his lyrical style because he's got science fiction elements. Children of the Sea, a kind of song about the environment, the future, covered in water. You've got the fantastic Lady Evil next. It's absolutely brilliant. And then side 1 finishes with Heaven and Hell, one of the greatest epics ever. Amazing. Side 2 open with Wishing Well, brilliant. And then Die Young. So the first 6 tracks were just absolutely superb. Walk Away, that's the filler track for me, although it has got its fans. And then it finishes with Lonely as a Word, which is a track which grows on me. as the years go by. So absolutely phenomenal album. They go out on tour. The album goes platinum. It's Dio's first platinum album. He's now made Rising. He's now made Heaven and Hell. He's already made 2 of the greatest albums ever in the heavy metal, hard rock genre. Obviously, Tony Iommi's already made Black Sabbath, Paranoid, Master Reality, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, Sabotage, Volume 4, and this, Geezer Butler. You know, it's amazing. The next album they do is, I think initially people were like, it's good, but it's not as good as Mob Rules, but it's close. Now, some people prefer this album. I've got a mate who he prefers this, and a famous person who prefers this is Andy Sneap, the producer of Accept, Judas Priest, Megadeth, Saxon. So this album, how does it differ? It's a little kind of rawer sound. It's a bit more deeper, raucous, and it's got a similar kind of formula. So for Neon Nights, the up-tempo opener, on this we've got Turn Up the Night, which is awesome. I've got a little tale about Turn Up the Night in a sec. Then you've got Voodoo. This is one of my all-time favourite Sabbath songs with Dio. Maybe one of Dio's greatest vocals. Again, it's that kind of lyric warning you, you know, the Tarot Woman, Voodoo, all that. So that's track 2. Sign of the Southern Cross, that's kind of the Heaven and Hell track. It's real slow, brilliant live, absolutely massive riff, massive Tony Iommi progression. You know, it's the Grand Canyon of chord progressions. Fantastic lyrics, amazing bass by Geezer. When you see it live and he uses the wah-wah. Great drumming by Vinny Appice. So Vinny Appice comes in and he picks up where Bill Ward played straighter on the Heaven and Hell album, and Vinny Appice kind of runs with that and just kind of goes for that more direct sort of Bonham-esque thing, I guess. Then there's E5150, little instrumental, then it goes into the title track, which is another one of the all-time great metal tracks. Fantastic vocal, amazing riff, great solo. That finished side 1. Then side 2, I think side 2 is where the album kind of tails a little bit. Opens with Country Girl side 2, a track I really like. Then you got Slipping Away, which is kind of the commercial rocker. It's a good track, it's not great, but it's good. Then the sort of deep cut classic on here, Falling Off the Edge of the World. And then it finished with Over and Over, which is a track I wasn't as fussed off with before, but I've got more into. It's in I think it's in 6/8 time. It's got a nice feel. So it's a great record. It's a 9 out of 10. I think Heaven and Hell's better, but I would understand if someone said I actually like Mob Rules. I think Voodoo, you know, is right up there. Voodoo and Mob Rules. You Turn Up the Night. You've got to have those tracks in your life. Yeah, the Turn Up the Night. My brother was at a disco in I think it was a place called Clawthorpe. No, Silverdale. There's a place near where I live called Silverdale. It's in the, it's about 10 miles from Kendal. And he went to a disco when he was 16. They were playing loads of crap, apparently. And he went up to the DJ, or his mate did, and said, "Oh, can you play some heavy metal?" And the only heavy metal thing the guy had was Black Sabbath. And I don't know which single it was, but the B-side was Turn Up the Night. So they were expecting him to play the A-side, but he played Turn Up the Night, so they just went absolutely mental in the disco. So it was probably like 2 lads on the dance floor going absolutely mental to Turn Up the Night, where, you know, a load of people were standing around thinking, why is this not the Human League? But anyway, nothing wrong with the Human League. Okay, basically after that they do the Live Evil album, The Fallout. They part company, sadly. One of the greatest metal bands in history, the second lineup of Black Sabbath. Dio forms his own band, so he gets together with Jimmy Bain and Vinny Appice, and they go on a hunt for a guitarist. They basically don't like the sort of American guys who are coming through. They want a more British sound, so they travel to the UK and they find a guy called Vivian Campbell who's been in Sweet Savage. So some of you may remember the great Friday rock show session of Sweet Savage back in 81. All I remember about that is the guitar solos did stand out, and some of the riffs on this album from those days. So Dio, just to show what he's capable of, he makes his third classic album, his third definitive classic album. I think the difference is here, he's made 3 classic albums with different bands. I would argue Mob Rules is a classic, and Long Live Rock and Roll, so he's made 5 classic albums, but no artist in history, I think, has made a classic album with 2 or more bands. He's done with 3. So Holy Diver, Great record. I remember the single at the time. My brother had that, and the B-side was a different version of a song called Evil Eyes, which later turns up on the next album. It's a great album. Stand Up and Shout, opener, Holy Diver, Don't Talk to Strangers, Rainbow in the Night. They're the 4 staple tracks of this album. They're the ones that always play live, the ones people know better. So again, I think what's really interesting is the deeper cuts. I think Gypsy's a great track, track 3. It's just a kind of slightly sleazy rocker. I think Dio said he wanted to do a kind of Rolling Stones type of song. It doesn't sound like the Rolling Stones, but I can see sort of where it's coming from. But it's a great track. His vocal's awesome on it. Track 4, Caught in the Middle. That's the filler track for me, but it's a good song. Then Straight Through the Heart, absolute killer. I think Hailstorm covered this. And it's a great vocal on this. I actually did a cover of this years ago with some people down south. A place with Kim Bolton and it was hard to sing. It's in F sharp. Then Invisible, another track. It's a bit like kind of like Gypsy, cool lyric. Again, great song. Rainbow in the Dark, obviously, and then it finished with Shame on the Night, which has kind of got a slow beat, a bit like Sign on the Southern Cross. Really good, 9 out of 10. Classic debut album, classic album. Great guitar, great drums, real chemistry. And they continue with that. With some people argue this is his 6th classic album, that's Last in Line. I think it probably is. So some people prefer this to Holy Diver. I think I used to. I prefer the Holy Diver album. I think the production on Holy Diver is better and it's just a bit more consistent with tracks. But basically hit the ground running with We Rock and Last in Line. Fantastic tracks. The Last in Line tracks kind of in the same feel as Holy Diver, and the solos got a similar vibe, but I think I prefer the Last in Line. It's really epic. Then you got Breathless. That's a great track. Really good. Then track 4, I Speed at Night. That's a really fast track. Like Stand Up and Shout. I like it. Probably not as much, but it's good. And side 1 finished with One Night in the City, which is a really, really good song. They used to play that live a bit. Side 2 opened up with the re-recorded Evil Eyes, so have a listen to the Last in Line version and then you can find the Holy Diver B-side version and decide. I can't remember which one. One's got a faster tempo. I think it might be on this album. I think Viv Campbell has some slightly different guitar, but Evil Eyes is a great track. I think that's the great deep cut off the album. Then I think the next 2 tracks are the kind of fillers for me. There's Mystery, which is the sort of commercial single, and then Eat Your Heart Out. They're not bad tracks, they just don't totally do it for me. And then it finishes off with another epic classic, Egypt, The Chains Are On. So it's a really good record. I'd give it an 8 out of 10, but some people might give it more. But it is, it's an album you've got to have. So, now Ronnie James Dio's done 3 Stone Cold classics and 3 albums you could argue are classics as well. So basically, the next few albums I'm going to talk about, I don't own, but I've heard them. I'll need to refer to my computer a bit just to kind of do the tracks. Sorry about this. So the next album's like the Sacred Heart album. So my brother got this when it came out, and I think the feeling was that things had kind of, they'd done Holy Diver, Last in Line, and the inspiration wasn't there as much on this. And listening to it recently, it's a good record. It's just not as great as those first 2. The King of Rock and Roll opens it up and goes into the title track. Then you got Another Lie and Rock and Roll Children. And in actual fact, side 1, that's pretty decent. Obviously a lot of people know Rock and Roll Children. Probably remember them on the Tube with Craig Goldie doing that. Another Lie is the kind of track people probably don't know as well, but it's a really good track. Great riff, great groove. I think Vivian Campbell, obviously there was problems by this point with Vivian Campbell and his relationship with Ronnie James Dio. And my feeling is he's not as inspired in this. The solos don't jump out as much. But I think side 1 on this album's strong. Then there's Hungry for Heaven. I like this track. Cool solo on this. It's a commercial, going for the sort of single vibe. I like it. And then I think after that, it kind of, there's Like a Beat of a Heart, Just Another Day, Fallen Angels, Shoot Shoot. None of these tracks are bad tracks. They're solid. They just haven't got the kind of inspiration for me of the previous 2 albums. Actually, the deluxe edition, you get some extra tracks, and I've just noticed a track called Hide in the Rainbow, which was on the Iron Eagle soundtrack. That's a great track. Classic Hide in the Rainbow, very Dio. So that's worth checking out. So I'd probably say that album's about a 6 out of 10. And then it goes on to the next album, which is Dream Evil. Again, my brother had this back in the day. So I remember it coming out and listening to it a bit. I think my feeling was I didn't like Craig Goldie's guitar playing as much at the time. And the production seemed more muffled. Listening to it now, I think it's got more, and I think Craig Goldie catches this. Craig Goldie's got more of a Blackmore vibe in his playing. And the type of riffs and the type of guitar sound they get does sort of recall kind of Rainbow more. And I think the songs are a lot stronger here. I think Craig Goldie coming in has kind of inspired things more. So side one, you had Night People, Dream Evil, Sunset Superman, and All the Fools sailed away, not failed. And they're good tracks. It's a good, solid side one, really good writing. Got some different elements that they've had than they've had before. Dream Evil's got a cool kind of Man on the Silver Mountain style riff. Then side two, you had Naked in the Rain and Over Love. Yeah, they're good tracks. I Could Have Been a Dreamer. That's the kind of rock and roll children commercial track on it. I like it. Then the next track's one of my favourites, Faces in the Window. I think this is the strongest track on side two for me. It's got a really good groove. And then it finishes with When a Woman Cries, which is another good track. So, yeah, my feeling about this album now, it's it's certainly a 7, maybe pushing an 8 out of 10. I think it's an album that it's worth visiting and reassessing. Then he parts company with Craig Goldie. There's quite a long gap to the next album. I didn't hear anything off this album at the time, so I came to it late. It's the Lock Up the Wolves album. Now, I always thought this had 13 tracks on. That's saying 11 here, but he gets some Rowan Robinson in on guitar, is very good. Jimmy Baines on bass. Actually, he says he's written it here, but I don't think he plays on it. No, Teddy Cook played on this. Apologies. But he gets Jens Hansen on keyboards, who's the great keyboard player from Yngwie Malmsteen. Yeah, listening to this album, came into it late. Again, Dio's not going to make a bad album, but it just doesn't do it for me as much, this one. But some interesting tracks like Evil on Queen Street, Wild One's the opener. I think Night Music was another good one. So if you're a fan of Dio, it's worth checking out. I just not as keen on it. Another interesting thing on this is Dio produced all the albums of Dio up to this point. They've got Tony Platten as a co-producer on this, but it doesn't really add anything to the party. I've always felt Tony Platte's a great engineer, but not as much as a producer, and I think Dio felt that. So what happens next is Dio, the sales aren't great for Lock Up the Wolves and Dream Evil, who's playing to like half-size arenas. I should just mention that both the Holy Diver and the Last in Line went platinum, and the Sacred Heart went gold. So he was a properly established headline act with an amazing stage show. If you see the Live from the Spectrum, is it? I think the Last in Line too. They've got a massive pyramid and lasers. Yeah, it looks brilliant. So he goes back to his old mates in Black Sabbath, and they come up with this album, Dehumanize. Now, Cozy Powell was going to play drums on this, I think, because he'd been playing with Tony Iommi in the previous incarnation of Black Sabbath. But him and Ronnie James Dio didn't get along, I think, in Rainbow, so Vinny Appice came back. So it's basically the Heaven and Hell tour, the Mob Rules lineup. This is, again, I've got to confess, I know it sounds like a bit bad of me, but I didn't get this album at the time. I heard TV Crimes. I like that. I was kind of into kind of the tail end of hair metal and LA metal, I suppose. And then it's just going into that weird time in the 90s. I nearly saw them live on this tour because I wanted to see Testament, because I liked Alex Skolnick and they were supporting them. And I imagine it would have been a fantastic gig, but I never went to the Manchester Apollo. So I came to this album later. I got this in the early noughties. I was kind of getting back in to a lot of the old stuff I listened to, and I was checking out albums I hadn't heard before. This is a really good record. It's a really good comeback record. It's very heavy. It's very slow tempos. It's very doomy. I think it's produced by Mac, who did Queen, the engineer of Queen. It sounds massive. The drums are like inhumanly large. So your tracks on here, you've got Computer God, was great. After All, it's great. TV Crimes, that was on Planet Rock the other day. I think it holds up. I really like the lyric. He's criticising television evangelists. Letters from Earth, Letters from Earth, yeah, that's properly evil. Side 1, track 5, that finished with Master of Insanity, which I think is the weakest track on the album, but it's pretty good. Then you got Time Machine, that's got a pretty evil riff. Then, the last 3 tracks on this are really cool. You've got Sins of the Father, which is proper heavy. Too Late, which is the ballad. It's really good. Got a great chorus, heavy chorus. Dio, great vocal. And then it finished with Buried Alive, which is quite an evil Iommi riff. Yeah, it's a solid 8 out of 10. I'm sure, actually I'm looking at this sleeve and it looked like it's been scanned and printed. Obviously had, no access to the original artwork when they're doing the CD. Never been remastered. Actually, it's probably been reissued in the Rules of Hell box set. So, that's a really good record. It's well worth checking out. It's not on the level of Heaven and Hell or Mob Rules, but for a band, in the early 90s is a difficult time for bands. And I think it stands a test of time. Then the fallout again. Rob Halford actually ends up standing in for Ronnie Dio at a gig because the Sabbath are going to support Ozzy. Dio feels they shouldn't be supporting Ozzy, and I can understand that. I can understand why that would seem strange. I don't know how Rob comes in. I think they must ring Rob Halford. Anyway, there's bootlegs of Rob Halford singing that set. He does an amazing job. And that probably shows you he's probably the one guy who could do it. The other greatest metal singer ever, Rob Halford, does an incredible job. So then Dio goes back to Dio. And the next album he does, I'm just going into my computer, is an album I really like, Strange Highways. So this is quite interesting because it kind of carries on with the Dehumanizer sound. So that really heavy, big powerful drums of Dehumanizer, he carries on that, I think, anyway. And this is produced, engineered and mixed by Mike Fraser, who did Coverdale Page and stuff, really good engineer. And in this sense, I think the producer bringing in the outside guy works really well. Mike Fraser gets a really massive drum sound, and he gets an evil guitar sound. There's a guy called Tracy G comes on guitar. Now, he's quite controversial because he's not a very melodic player. Vivian Campbell, Craig Goldie, Rowan Robertson, later on Doug Aldridge, Richie Blackmore. Every player he's played with was very melodic, but Tracy G did a lot of kind of whammy bar and harmonics. But I quite like what he does. He's got like a really kind of over the top sound. He does like really over the top whammies. I would describe him as gnarly. His guitar's sound is almost coming out of the speakers and attacking you. Drums, Jeff Pilson, I think, is on bass. Yeah, so Jeff Pilson from Docken's on bass on this. He's actually played with Dio a bit. So it's really good. You got Jesus, Mary and the Holy Ghost opens it, which has got like a tritone opening it up, like a discordant chord. So he's using his lyrical styles changing on this, like with Dehumanize. He's bringing contemporary things into the lyrics, and it works. Firehead, that's a great track. Strange Highways, that's a slow kind of Sign of the Southern Cross. The 4th track, Hollywood Black, that's great. And the lyric on that's really good. It's just about Hollywood and the dark side of Hollywood and the corruption and drugs and stuff. Really good. And then side 1 finished on the original with Evolution. That's evil with Lucian, Evolution. That's really good. So looking at that, side 1's really strong. Then it opened up with Pain on side 2. That's a great track. 1 Foot in the Grave, maybe not as good. Give Her the Gun, that's pretty good. Blood from Stone, that's a great track. And the last track, Bring Down the Rain. So there's easily 7 or 8 really cool songs on this album. I think when last time I listened to it, it is a solid 7 out of 10. It's quite hard to get a copy of it, and I definitely want to get a copy of it. But I imagine it's been reissued again in the Dio box set. But I think this is like a hidden gem in the Dio catalogue. Next album's Angry Machines. I hadn't heard this at the time. I borrowed a copy of it, but by this time, I think a lot of people think heavy metal ends in 1990 or 91, but it doesn't. A lot of those bands survive with some good stuff into 92, 93, but when you get into the mid-90s, 95, 96, even though the grunge bands and that era's kind of coming to an end, mainly due to like the main figures, the drug problems or death, sadly, the bands of that time, they find themselves in difficult situations, just not knowing where to go with the direction, because you got new metal coming in as well. So I'm not really going to comment on this album. I just don't know it well enough. He there's a track called "This Is Your Life" at the end, which has got I think it's a piano ballad, and that's good. There's a track on here called "Double Monday." I don't understand that title. So then what happens? Things are really bad for all these kind of bands, and Dio just stopped for 4 years. I don't know what he does. It's probably hard to make a living then. You're going to be playing clubs. A guy of his calibre with his legacy. Then what happens in the end of the 90s, a lot of bands realise we can't compete, let's just do our classic sound. And then that kind of tallies with people getting more interested in the development of what we call classic rock. Iron Maiden make the Brave New World album, Rob Halford makes the Resurrection album, and Dio makes the Magica album. So I first heard the track Fever Dreams on the Evil or Divine live in New York DVD, and I heard the track live when I saw him in 2002. So I checked out this album, and it's really good. It's a concept album, it's a sci-fi story. So again, it's combining Dio's two favourite things. It's got kind of myth and magic in there, and it's got a sci-fi story. And the idea is that an evil saviour, basically, I think. So the hero is kind of evil, but not. Something like that. But it's a good record. It's got really good tunes on it. Craig Goldie plays well on this. I think Simon Wright's on drums. It's a little bit slow tempo. His Dio albums after this, certainly his last one, are a bit slow mid-tempo. But there's not a bad track on it. There's a great track as long as it's not about love, losing my insanity, otherworld. Turn to Stone, yeah. It's good, and then it finishes with a bonus track, which is the Magic Story. Actually reads the story, so it's like Metal Jackanory with Dio. So what happens then is Craig Goldie, I think they're going to do the next album. Craig Goldie has a child with his partner. So last minute they did the Killing the Dragon album and they get in a guy on guitar who they were Ronnie Dio was looking back at in 1990 when he got Rowan Robinson. One of the guys who auditioned and they looked at, was Doug Aldridge. And now this is a really important moment in the history of guitar, because at this point, a lot of people don't know who Doug Aldridge is unless you know the Lion albums, Hurricane, House of Lords, Bad Moon Rising. This is all kind of lower level stuff. You wouldn't know who he was. So Doug Aldridge finally gets a gig worthy of his talents and gets a lot of exposure with this. Now some people don't like Doug Aldridge's take as much in this. There seems to be two schools with this. Some people are like, no, I'm not fussed with Killing a Dragon. People like me think it's Dio's best album since the Last in Line. And for me, a lot of the reason is Doug Aldridge. I think the songs are really great. There's a few more up-tempo numbers, but I think Doug Aldridge has got a great rhythm guitar sound. He's really tight, and his soloing is phenomenal on this record. And Dio sounds great, in great form. And the production, I really like the production on this. This album, I was making an album back in 2006, and this was the CD that me and the other guitarists took in and go, we like the production on this. And the Killing the Dragon track, that comes in, it's got a great gallop, great rhythm guitar sound, great vocal, and a phenomenal guitar solo by Doug Aldridge, one of his greatest ones. Then track 2, Along Came a Spider, I'm not fussed with that track. Then one of my favourite tracks, Scream, brilliant. Better in the Dark, that's great. Then Rock and Roll's kind of the slow track, that's track 5. Then Push was a single, and Jack Black appeared in the video. So another thing which started to resurrect Dio was that Tenacious D got popular, and they would do covers of Heaven and Hell, and do that thing where they'd affectionately take the mickey a little bit out of Dio. Basically, they were kind of going, oh, there's this heavy metal guy, but actually, he's actually brilliant. And there's a great video for Push, Jack Black and Kyle, what's the word I'm looking for, they're busking. And Dio walks down the street and he kind of pays him to shut up. It's brilliant. And it's so lovely. It's so lovely for Dio. Just people kind of go, oh, who's that guy? Oh, it's the greatest metal singer ever. Then there's Guilty. That's a good track. Throw Away the Children and like that. Lovely solo on that. Then Before the Fall and Cold Feet. Yeah, it's a really good record. It's only really the second track I'm not fussed about. So for me, that's a solid 8 out of 10. Not everyone would agree with that. After that, he makes the Master of the Moon album. Again, I'm not fussed with that. I'll just go in here, and I should say there is a live thing called Intermission he did years ago. There's some other stuff, Evil or Divine, you can get that on CD. That's live in New York with Doug Aldrin on guitar, and Holy Diver live, which is great. So, Master of the Moon, I mean, yeah, cool cover. It's One More for the Road, Master of the Moon, End of the World, Shivers. Yeah, the fifth track was the one that stood out to me, The Man Who Would Be King. It's got a really gothic Hammond organ on it, I think. I really like that. Craig Goldie's back in. It's not an album I know that well. I think because I really like Killing the Dragon, I wasn't as keen on this. I didn't really listen to it as much, so I'll probably go back to that sometime. And then basically Black Sabbath released a compilation, Black Sabbath the Dio years. It's compilation, but they get together and create 3 new tracks for it, and one of them I think stunning is called Shadow of the Wind. And when they played live, when I finally saw them live, they played that track and it was an absolute showstopper. There's Ear in the Wall and The Devil Cried. Yeah, those are the 3 new tracks. Anyway, he gets back with Tony Iommi. They write these tracks. It goes so well, and the compilation's well received, and people are like, oh, this is great. This is great stuff. They decide to reform, but they can't call it Black Sabbath. So in actual fact, they kind of revert to what they originally wanted to do, which is not have the Black Sabbath name. They call themselves Heaven and Hell, and they release the Devil You Know in 2009. I really like this record. I think it's a really strong comeback record. I like the production. I think they recorded it in 12 days or something. Vinny Appice on drums, Geezer on bass. Atom and Evil opens up. This was actually Ronnie James Dio come up with this riff, and it's really simple. It's just moving power chords, but I love it. I don't know what the lyrics are about. It's kind of Garden of Eden, but it's a really good opener. Then you got Fear. That's really good. It's about religious sort of fundamentalism, I think. Then Bible Black. Yeah, great. Great intro to that. Nice sort of clean intro, and then it goes heavy. Great lyric by Dio. And he does some of his great ad-libs at the end. One of the things I love with Dio is when the song kind of fading out, finishing. He'll do little riffs on the title of the song, the chorus lyrics. And it's, he does that so well, and it creates a lot of excitement. And then the track like I Love Double the Pain got a really evil riff. Awesome. So the first 4 tracks are really good on this. Then track 5, what I'd call the end of side 1, I guess. Rock and Roll Angel. Don't like that as much, but it is a good track, and it's got a really good middle section where Iommi does some classic clean stuff. Then track 6 is a track I'm not as keen on really at all, Turn of the Screw, and then you got Eating the Cannibals. So this is the first kind of really up-tempo number. Although it's not great, the album benefits from that, and I think they played it live. Then track 8 for me is one of the great tracks on the album, Follow the Tears. It's got one of the most evil Iommi riffs ever. It's one of the heaviest riffs ever. It's one of my favourite Dio lyrics. Come lie on a bed of nails and slumber. I love that. Then it kind of tails off Neverwhere, another up-tempo track, but I don't like that one. And then it finishes with Breaking Into Heaven, which is a really heavy, slow, powerful track. So I think it's good as 7, 8 out of 10. I like the production. For the guys this age, by this time Ronnie James Dio's 68. Is he 67? Something like that. And Tony Iommi, he's nearing 60, so they made a really good record. They toured on the Dio Years album. The gig at the arena in Newcastle that I saw was absolutely phenomenal. The best sound I ever heard at the arena, phenomenal light show. If they played Turn Up the Night and what's the other track? Lady Evil, it would have been absolutely perfect. They didn't, but it was great anyway. And then they do that album, they do a live from Radio City Music Hall. So Ronnie James Dio, he's back in 5,000, 6,000 seaters when we saw him with the arena. Yeah, it wasn't full, or on the Lamb of God, but there must have been 3,000, 4,000 people there. And he's getting, that Indian summer that a man of his legend and legacy deserves. And then, tragically, we're here, he's got cancer. I still remember the day he passed. I knew he was ill, and my mate texted me, and then, so a sad day that's still remembered. But as his wife said, he never had to. The one thing was he didn't have to suffer his voice going. He was still in peak form. right up until the end, in spite of what must have been some physical manifestations that would have affected his singing, I think. So yeah, those are the Dio albums. I can see that's taken 45 minutes. Bloody hell. I'm sure I've missed something, but anyway, if I had, if there's anyone's into this, comments and that. Yeah, there's a few albums I don't know quite enough about. I've kind of dipped in and out there. So like I say, some people may have some viewpoints and interesting comments regarding those, and obviously the other stuff I've gone through in more detail. Cheers, thanks.